Hi guys, so just before I do get started with this video, I'm just letting you know that there are links to donation threads and petition threads down below. I urge everyone to donate if they can, and if you can't donate, to sign as many petitions as you can. I cannot stress how important it is. It's absolutely unacceptable that Black people are endangered every single day in 2020. I have voiced a majority of my opinions over on Twitter and Instagram, but obviously I want to touch on it in this video. And this isn't just a problem which is occurring now or it's a flare-up. This has been dating back centuries and centuries. And also, to those of you who can't donate, I've actually created a playlist on my channel of all people who are donating all of the revenue to Black Lives Matter and other organisations, so you guys can actually just click on the playlist, autoplay it, mute it, and just stick it on in the background. And obviously all the AdSense goes towards different organisations. And it isn't just an American problem either, it happens all over the world. I've seen a lot of people who live in the UK saying, so glad I don't live in America right now, which is bullshit because the UK is just as fucking guilty. May I remind you guys of Grenfell and Windrush and all of the Black people that have been killed by police or died in police custody. It's absolutely fucking unacceptable. So yeah, I urge you guys to donate if you can. Play those playlists and those videos where they're donating the revenue. Sign as many petitions as you can. If you are going to protest, make sure you stay as safe as you can. Yeah, no, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I know what you guys are thinking. Jordan, you're looking very glamorous today. I know. Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. So the reason I'm dressed like this, the reason I'm looking ever so glamorous today, is because I am talking about a topic which a lot of outsiders deem as quite glamorous, and that is OnlyFans. Obviously I'm looking as glamorous as I can with roots halfway down to my head, half my hair extensions have fallen out, and I've got no acrylics on. And not only am I going to be talking about OnlyFans in today's video, how OnlyFans and sort of the glamorization of it sort of relates to the wider topic of sex work in general, because I think it's something which often gets glossed over. A lot of people don't talk about sex work and in particular prostitution. As usual, in the pinned comment and in the description bar there is timestamps if you want to go to any section of the video, but obviously I recommend that you guys watch the whole thing. OnlyFans is a subscription service platform created in 2016 by London-born Tim Stokely. On this app, content creators post exclusive content which you can access by paying a monthly subscription, similar to how Patreon works. But OnlyFans has something a little bit extra up its sleeve. Tim Stokely looked at OnlyFans and was like, let me add a little spice to that.
Let me add a little bit of spice to that.
OnlyFans's unique quality is its deliberate lack of restrictive policies. So most social media sites have very restrictive policies. You can't even post a picture of a woman's nipple on Instagram without it being taken down. Because there is basically no censorship on OnlyFans, it's proved itself to be very popular for the distribution of adult content, and it's very, very popular for young female sex workers, which is the type of OnlyFans creator I will be focusing on in today's video. The type of adult content from these creators really ranges. It can be anything from bikini pictures and lingerie pictures to nude photographs, anything to sort of more sexual videos, and sometimes there is exclusive content within the subscription that you have to pay more money to access. And on top of the exclusive content within the exclusive content, there's also private messaging, which is a great way for a lot of these content creators to keep up a good rapport with their subscribers, because at the end of the day, subscribers are putting money in their pocket. They need to sort of keep them happy. OnlyFans is really becoming a powerhouse platform. It has over 30 million users, over 450,000 content creators, and has paid out over $750 million to its creators. I did touch on this in my last video, but something which really grabs my attention about OnlyFans is it seems whenever an influencer decides to start an OnlyFans, they seem to get a lot of hate, as in hounded by it. And I'm not just talking by random Twitter bots or boys who have football players as their avies. I'm talking like some of them get genuine critique, and I find it absolutely fascinating. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this segment of the video. I'm going to be talking about the pros and the cons of OnlyFans, whether it glamorizes sex work, whether it normalizes sex work, female liberation in terms of OnlyFans. And on top of that, I did actually interview quite a few girls for this video because I wanted to try and understand what OnlyFans is from the creators themselves. First question I sort of want to talk about is, why do people start OnlyFans? And the obvious answer is money.
Honestly, my main motivator to start was the fact that we were in quarantine and I was bored and I'm like, hey, this could make me a little bit of money.
Also, my main motivator was the money, I won't lie. I think that's probably what most people are in it for.
OnlyFans creators, in particular the ones in the very top percent that earn a lot of money, are definitely not shy about their earnings. Very popular posts on Twitter and Instagram of girls getting paid 5 figures a month for doing OnlyFans. And you see these young women posting that they're earning over 10k a month, and they're usually very positive about it. They're usually very like, you can do this too, this is so easy. And I think that's definitely what sparks a lot of people's initial interest. But an already obvious problem with this is because they're almost sort of saying, it's so easy, everyone can do it, I'm making 10k a month. I think they maybe probably unintentionally gloss over the actual work that is put into OnlyFans, but I will elaborate more on that point later. Because it is very difficult to get into that very, very top percent of OnlyFans. And one thing I did notice with the interviews that I conducted was a lot of the girls said that it looked fun, and that's what they wanted to do. It looked fun, they love their bodies, they're all about body positivity, which is something which I actually really, really liked.
And I didn't know about it until January. I first heard about it by reading an article on, I think it was Kylie Ward, a girl who raised money by selling nudes and donated it to the Australian bushfire thing. And I thought it was very impressive, so I started researching her and found out about OnlyFans, and I was like, you know, I'm going to try this too. It sounds fun. It sounds like something I could do. I'm confident in my body. I've always liked showing it.
And I definitely think when people think of OnlyFans, they only really think of the influencers who do OnlyFans, the influencers who already have a built-in audience, so they publicize it on their personal Instagrams and their personal Twitters. But a high amount of OnlyFans creators are actually anonymous. A lot of them will create separate profiles for their OnlyFans on Instagram and Twitter. They won't attach it to any personal profiles, so in a way they are anonymous because some of them don't even show their face. And a lot of the women that I spoke to said there's actually a lot of positivity within the OnlyFans community. Now, this isn't everyone's experience, but quite a few of the girls that I spoke to said that they've joined group chats, there's threads where other girls can promote each other, and a lot of them have actually made their closest friends through OnlyFans.
100% the best part about doing OnlyFans are the other people that you meet. I advertise on Twitter and I'm in a Twitter group with other people that are doing it, and they are honestly just the best people and they are really fun.
Because already it's very easy to get along with someone who's in the same line of work as you because you already have that sort of common ground. But definitely with a sort of stigmatized job like OnlyFans where you don't really meet that many people who do the same job as you, I can imagine the bonds that are created are very strong. And another reason to make an OnlyFans is it is a safe alternative to other forms of sex work such as prostitution, but I will elaborate more on that later in the video. So let's talk about the pros of OnlyFans. The first obvious one being the money. Some of the top percentage of creators make upwards of 10k a month. And another pro of OnlyFans is working for yourself. Now, I have mentioned this in quite a few previous videos before. A lot of sex work, such as prostitution, stripping, porn, can really be absolute cesspools for exploitation. And the thing is with OnlyFans is that you are in control. You control what content you create and what content you distribute. Chances of exploitation are much lower than other forms of sex work. And obviously working for yourself does come with other perks, like you can have flexible work hours, you can work wherever and whenever you want, you can work from home. And because it's flexible, it's a great side hustle to have if you're doing something else, whether you're at university, whether you have another job, whether you just want to get a little bit of extra cash. It's great for that kind of thing. And a lot of the women I spoke to really find it a confidence boost. I mean, having men pay money to see your naked body or to see your nudes, like.
Number two, it's actually given me quite a bit of confidence. I've never been massively confident about my body. but getting like putting nice lingerie on and doing my makeup and taking nice photos and stuff, it does give me a lot of confidence. And when I look back at the photos, I like seeing myself like that. It makes me love my body, and it's nice to get compliments from people on the way I look.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, if a man wanted to pay real money out of his pocket to see me naked, I'd be fucking flattered. And before I get onto sort of the negatives of OnlyFans, I want to talk about whether OnlyFans is glamorized or not. I mean, a lot of you guys may be thinking, Jordan, of course it isn't, these women get hounded with criticism all the time, which is true. And because of the excessive criticism that OnlyFans creators receive, I can't really blame them for hyping up their jobs so much that they unintentionally glamorize it, especially when the majority of the OnlyFans creators that we actually see on social media are already influencers, so they already have a built-in audience, and usually they're selling sort of bikini and lingerie pictures on there. Of course, I'm sure that hard work has been put into it, but they didn't have to really grind and grind to try and build their audience up because they already had their audience there waiting, because a majority of OnlyFans creators start with 0 followers, and a lot of hard work does go into OnlyFans, and I know I can foresee it. I'm already gonna get comments with some fucking old man saying, I eat bricks and I eat sand for a living for 12 hours a day. Look, just because your job is harder doesn't mean that the job isn't hard. And especially the people who say OnlyFans isn't hard work aren't even OnlyFans creators, so they would not know the ins and the outs of the job.
I definitely think that OnlyFans is glamorized and made to look easy. I thought it would be so easy. I didn't think it would be that much work, but now that I'm into it, I know that it is a lot of hard work. And even other friends that I have on Twitter that are doing it, I always think that all the content just looks so effortless. And it does.
At the end of the day, OnlyFans is a job, and no one really enjoys their job. I don't necessarily blame any OnlyFans creators for not talking about the negative sides of OnlyFans, because I can understand defending an already stigmatized job. On top of that, whenever I do see OnlyFans creators sort of airing their grievances, they are met with so much critique of, just get another job, why don't you get a real job then, as if people aren't allowed to complain about their jobs. Was the costume change necessary? No. I've been watching too much ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. So I'm now going to talk about sort of the unspoken truth slash the darker side slash the negatives. I'm not doing this to add more stigma to the job. That's not what I want to do at all. I think with any job you need to sort of talk about the pros and the cons, just to sort of manage people's expectations, especially because OnlyFans is gaining more and more popularity by the day. So the first con being creepy men. Now I know a lot of people are going to say this is part of the job, it's what you expect. Just because it's part of the job doesn't mean it's right. What really sort of makes creepy men kick off on OnlyFans is they'll subscribe to someone's OnlyFans, either the content will not be what they expected or they'll request something. Requesting something, there's nothing wrong with requesting something if that creator takes requests, but if the creator turns down the request, usually the man will just start hurling abuse at them.
The worst part is probably the fear of people that know me personally finding out, or there's also just some guys that really try to take advantage of you and just get free stuff out of you, and that's really annoying. But I'd say the worst part is just the fear of being found out by people that know me and them just not being okay with it.
I despise with my whole heart the argument of it's part of the job, you should expect it, or just go and get a new job. I used to work at a Starbucks drive-thru. I got held abuse at every single day if we were understaffed or if the drinks were slow. Should I expect negative customer experiences in that job? Yes, but it doesn't mean it's right. Getting verbally abused by customers was expected in my line of work at that time, but it doesn't mean that it's justifiable. It's also quite a pressuring job, knowing that basically your income relies on people staying subscribed to you. It can be a lot of pressure to try and put out as much content as you can, try and improve your content constantly, try and please every single person that messages you.
Also the pressure. I mean, I know that my subscribers are basically paying for me making content. If I don't end up making content at all, I don't know, I just don't feel good. Usually I don't get called out for it if my uploading schedule isn't perfect, but I don't feel good about it. It's a lot of pressure, and also some people, it barely happens to me, or some people are very demanding. I mean, they're not paying all that much. They're paying $10 and they want like a girlfriend for the whole month.
It can be a lot of pressure knowing that your income basically relies on other people staying subscribed to you. And there is a big decision which OnlyFans creators make, and it's whether to make a whole new profile and sort of keep it fairly anonymous, or to promote their OnlyFans on their personal profile. Both definitely have their pros and their cons.
For me, I find the worst part is it's hard to promote your OnlyFans through social media accounts that you already have. So you have to take that risk and that step to share your OnlyFans link on your social media. Personally find it really, really uncomfortable when mutuals or people that I know I've like just met before in the past like message me on Instagram. I don't like the thought of knowing who has those pictures of me. Like, and I know I'm putting them out there for anyone to see.
Creating a whole new account can be good because it's basically like a blank slate. You can stay anonymous if you want, you can make the account private, and people in your sort of personal life, if you don't want them knowing, won't know that you have an OnlyFans. But obviously there's a con to that because you are starting from a blank slate, and it's a lot more difficult than people think to build yourself up from 0 followers. If you do decide to promote your OnlyFans on your personal account, it's sort of unfortunately inevitable that people in your personal life, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, whether it's just people from your hometown, are gonna judge you for it, and that's not a very good feeling. On top of that, no one really knows whether having an OnlyFans account or previously having an OnlyFans account affects your future job opportunities if it's attached to your personal profile. I'd love to know what you guys think. Should it have an effect? Absolutely not. Unfortunately, we live in a society which stigmatizes female sexuality, so it wouldn't surprise me if people lost job opportunities because they used to have an OnlyFans account or currently have an OnlyFans account. And I know someone is going to comment saying if a man was doing the same thing, he would lose job opportunities as well, which may be true, but if we just look at the way that society treats male strippers versus female strippers, we can see that society obviously stigmatizes female sexuality far more. I want to talk about whether OnlyFans represents female liberation, because I think this is something which sort of divides people slightly. On one hand, many people, including OnlyFans creators themselves, feel very liberated in their job. They feel very empowered because they're monetizing their body and their sexuality. A lot of them said that men sexualize women anyway, so the fact that we can now make money from it is a big bonus.
I mean, fucking yes. Do you know what the most liberating thing about OnlyFans is actually? When you see these like boys on Twitter or whatever, or just comments online of people slagging it off, because it's like people have even like called me or whatever and been like, oh, I've seen you put this up your ass on your OnlyFans, and it's like, so your money is in my pocket? That's fucking liberating, to be honest.
I definitely think that OnlyFans represents female liberation. Anything that women can do that they are in control of and they can make money off of it, that is liberation. You are taking control of your life and you're doing whatever you want.
There is a pattern of power imbalance in sex work, whether it's porn stars and their agents, strippers and their managers, prostitutes and their pimps. OnlyFans, as I've said before, is a way for sex workers to work for themselves, so they are the ones who hold the power within their client relationships. But of course, there are a lot of people, including a lot of feminists actually, who believe that sex work is the opposite of feminism, and it's the opposite of liberating, and it's the opposite of empowering. They believe that men are being given what they want, and that women are sexualized enough in society, and a lot of them believe that sex workers are almost pandering to it. A lot of people question, how can OnlyFans be liberating if you get sent abuse from your clients when you don't even meet their expectations? And I do understand where both perspectives come from, I do. But I think that OnlyFans is really a great form of safe sex work. Is it as glamorous as it seems? No. You're gonna get abuse from random men that you don't know. A lot of hard work goes into it. You're probably not gonna be one of those people that makes 10 grand a month, but it's a great way to do sex work and not be exploited. Related to female liberation and OnlyFans, I want to talk about something a little bit more serious. I want to talk about sort of female liberation and the topic of sex work, and in particular prostitution. The topic of sex work and female liberation, it's a sticky one to say the least. I sort of made this mistake in my last video that I just said, oh, I'm very sex work positive, which I think is a very broad statement to make. And I started getting a few comments from people where they were like, how can you be sex work positive because it's intrinsically harmful to women? And I started getting really confused. So I ended up messaging a friend of mine who I know is very educated in sex work topics, and she actually recommended me a book. The book is this one. It is Revolting Prostitutes by Juno Mack and Molly Smith. I did a majority of my research using this book, so I recommend everyone to read this. Everyone, even if you have no interest in learning about sex work, I think everyone needs to read this, especially if you are a feminist and you care a lot about women's rights. I really struggle with reading, but this is great because it is digestible without watering down any of the topics. The reason that I think prostitution is so relevant when it comes to the topic of OnlyFans and female liberation is because when people are talking about OnlyFans being liberating to women, they tend to sort of blanket the entirety of sex work with that every form of sex work is liberating to women, which I definitely think oversimplifies the topic. It pushes aside a lot of important conversations that we need to have about sex work, in particular prostitution. And just before I do get started with this segment, I want to read out a quote from the book, which I think everyone just listen to this before you start leaving shitty comments, because I know there's going to be loads of you. Instead of using a few key figures that prove sex workers' rights arguments, we want the readers to think empathetically about how changes in criminal law change the incentives and behaviours of people who sell sex, along with clients, police, managers and landlords. If you understand how those behaviours change and why, then you will have a much deeper understanding of how changes in criminal law make people who sell sex more or less safe. The term sex work is actually an umbrella term. I'm gonna read the definition from my laptop. The definition of sex work is the exchange of sexual services, performances or products for material compensation. For example, selling provocative pictures and videos on OnlyFans, being a cam girl, being a stripper, being a porn star or being a prostitute. This segment is going to be strictly about prostitution, and I will be referring to prostitutes as sex workers. I'll be referring to prostitution as sex work. So when I say something like sex workers don't have workers' rights, I am not talking about girls that do OnlyFans or cam girls, I'm talking strictly about prostitutes. And because sex work is dominated by females and most of the clients are male, I will be referring to sex workers as she and clients as he, but I am more than aware that there are male sex workers as well. Sex work is not a black and white topic. There are a lot of grey areas. Of course there are sex workers who genuinely enjoy their job, but the reality is that is only a very small minority. A majority of sex workers become sex workers because they need money. A majority of them don't get into it because they want to. A lot of them may have families, they may have drug dependencies, or they may just be trying to survive. What I'm trying to say is these women are not putting their life at risk for no reason. They're usually doing it because they need to do it. So this notion of women can do what they want with their bodies, sex work represents female liberation and female empowerment. Although the intent is good, this message unintentionally pushes aside the real issues that we need to be addressing, such as bad working conditions, unsafe working conditions, and violence against sex workers. And let's just get one thing clear here. Criminalisation is not gonna work. Criminalisation has never worked. So that supposed solution is already off the table. If we're really gonna boil it down to the nitty gritty, the only way to abolish sex work is to abolish poverty, because a majority of sex workers become sex workers because they need money. Don't attack sex workers for getting into their line of work. Attack the system that got them there in the first place. Often a lot of people, especially feminists, will argue that sex work is not a legitimate form of work because it is exploitative. But isn't every job exploitative? I mean, if you think about it, Starbucks, for example. It's a physically exhausting job. You're on your feet for usually 5 hours before you even get a break. Starbucks as a company makes £20 billion a year, yet pays its staff usually £7 to £9 an hour. Isn't that exploitation? Of course, I'm not trying to compare working at Starbucks to being a sex worker. Obviously, two completely different jobs there. But what I'm trying to illustrate with this comparison is just because a job is exploitative doesn't mean that it isn't a job. Because we live in a capitalist society, essentially nearly every single job is exploitative. Everyone deserves to be safe at work and to have workers' rights, regardless of what job you work. Because a lot of the time, people who are working unpleasant jobs are doing it because they need the money. And a large reason why sex work is as exploitative as it is because of the laws surrounding it. I'm going to be using the UK as an example. In the UK, it's actually legal to buy and sell sex. It just depends where and how you do it. So if you sell sex indoors by yourself, that's perfectly legal. But if you sell sex outdoors, that's illegal. But if you have any assistance with selling sex, whether you have a friend that answers emails, you have a bodyguard, or if you're renting a flat from a landlord, they could be charged with pimping because technically they are financially benefiting from your sex work. It is highly reported and very well known that a lot of sex workers fear the police more than they fear their actual clients. So any sort of legislation or criminalisation just gives more power to the police. And some of you guys may be wondering, why are sex workers so afraid of the police? Unless you are selling sex indoors and on your own, which is not what a lot of sex workers do, you are committing a crime. And because you're committing a crime, the police will want to arrest you and they will want to press charges against you. And especially if you're a migrant, you could end up being deported back to the country that you are most likely trying to flee from. Migrant or not, you will be left with a criminal record. Charge such as brothel keeping or pimping or prostitution related offences, it can ruin your life, which will push you back into sex work. It just ends up becoming a vicious cycle. And because of all of the laws surrounding prostitution and the criminalisation of it, a lot of sex workers have nowhere to turn when they are in trouble or when they experience violence. There's been multiple occasions where sex workers have gone to the police to report violence and the police have actually advised against it because they don't want to have to arrest the sex worker as well. And it is very unfortunate that almost the sex positivity movement can do a lot more harm than good when it comes to talking about prostitution. Living in this fantasy land where all sex workers love their jobs and have nothing but positive experiences with their clients, it just isn't true. Do you know Mac and Molly Smith actually described this as sort of a happy hookers type movement? And because of this, a lot of the real issues that need to be addressed, such as unsafe working conditions, violent clients, tends to be pushed to the side because people now think, oh, but prostitutes all love their jobs and have nothing but positive experiences. The happy hooker movement can downplay the trauma, violence and abuse which occurs within sex work. We need to show the realities of sex work so decriminalisation can take place, labour laws can be implemented and we can protect sex workers the best that we can. Sex workers who are being harmed within the industry need to be the centre of this conversation. And even if you are part of the very small minority of sex workers who do genuinely enjoy their jobs and seem to have a majority of positive experience, I can understand wanting to defend your stigmatised job, but by claiming that prostitution is an amazing job and nothing but good positive experiences happen, you are delegitimizing the negative experiences that a majority of sex workers have experienced. You are taking the focus away from them when the focus needs to be on them more than anyone. everyone. And there definitely is a fine line to walk with this, because you want to spread the word that being a sex worker often comes with very negative experiences. The reason for this is because of criminalisation of sex work and the lack of workers' rights. But you also don't want to demonise sex workers in any way. I'm actually going to read a quote from Revolting Prostitutes. Emphasises the extent to which sex work, is driven by a criminal underworld. He can sidestep awkward questions about the connections between prostitution, poverty and government policy, and align anti-prostitution measures with populist tough-on-crime approaches. Now, a tough-on-crime approach is not the right way to go about this. We've seen tough-on-crime approaches fail in the past, such as the war on drugs, and all that did was mass incarcerate people of colour, in particular black people and Hispanic people. Another fine line with fighting for sex workers' rights is how you portray sex workers themselves. Of course, we want to make their struggle abundantly clear, the violence they experience every day and their unsafe working conditions, but we don't want to portray them as irrational people who don't know any better and are acting out of trauma. A lot of the time, sex workers become sex workers because they need money. I'm going to read another quote from the book because I think this illustrates it very well. Prostitution is not what you do when you hit rock bottom. Prostitution is what you do to stay afloat. Sex work is dangerous for a multitude of reasons. The first reason being there is already a power imbalance between the sex worker and the client, because the client doesn't need the sex worker's services, but the sex worker needs the client's money. Therefore, the sex worker is more likely to adhere to her client's needs. Therefore, she is more likely to be taken advantage of and exploited. A lot of people who support criminalisation, especially feminists, use the argument of human trafficking, that it's this inherent evil that needs to be stopped. Now, I'm not disagreeing with that, but what I do want to explain is what human trafficking is. Human trafficking has unfortunately almost gotten the Hollywood treatment, where it is portrayed the same in every single big blockbuster as like an innocent white girl goes on holiday and gets kidnapped and is in chains and is transported across the globe. Now, don't get me wrong, trafficking like this does happen and it is awful and it is indefensible, but a lot of trafficking doesn't actually go down like this. Human trafficking is often someone trying to migrate to a different country. They are usually fleeing from a bad situation, and where legal migration is not possible, they will seek out a smuggler and get smuggled into the country, usually using fake documents. Being smuggled into a different country is very expensive, and a lot of the time when people are fleeing from a bad situation, they aren't in a very good financial place. The smugglers will propose to them that they can pay off their debts through sex work. This is where smuggling becomes trafficking. It's a very common occurrence that once the person has been smuggled over the borders, the almost terms of their contract will change. They'll often have to work longer than they expected to. They'll be subjected to bad working conditions and often violence and abuse. And they can't go to the police. Now, they won't be charged with smuggling because technically they are a victim of human trafficking, but they will be deported back to the country that they were trying to escape from. And a lot of the time, this illustrates how badly people want to flee from their country. Despite these women being deemed victims of trafficking, they are treated as if they're criminals because they are deported back to the country that they were so desperately trying to escape from. The only alternative to this is to provide safe legal migration, and the way that governments sidestep this conversation is they portray these women as victims of human trafficking and kidnapping, rather than women who were just trying to migrate, usually trying to escape from a very bad situation. You see, the thing is, governments' strict migration policies created the market for human trafficking and human smuggling. If these women could migrate safely, then they wouldn't have to seek out smugglers, and they more often than not would end up being exploited. Despite many governments insisting that the laws that they put in surrounding sex work are meant to protect sex workers have been treated as criminals and demonized for years. In the Victorian times, they were compared to animals, and you actually cannot enter the United States of America if you have sold sex in the last 10 years. This is along with terrorists, Nazis and spies. The only way to protect sex workers is to take power away from the police and from border control. The more power they have, the more sex workers are going to endanger themselves by trying to hide from them. Mainstream feminism often focuses on male violence, but a lot of mainstream feminists fail to recognise that sex workers are constantly victims of this violence, whether it's from their clients, their managers, or their landlords. Now, if you guys didn't know, selling sex indoors with another sex worker is illegal. It constitutes to brothel keeping. So even if you guys aren't having sex together with another client, if you just live together, that is a brothel. And I think the fact that selling sex indoors on your own is legal just proves that the government doesn't care about the actual act of selling sex, and they obviously don't care about women's safety, because it's common knowledge that it is far safer if you are a sex worker to be living with another sex worker. The government aren't criminalising sex work because they care about sex being sold or they care about women's safety. They're criminalising sex work because they don't want it to be visible to the public eye. Being a sex worker in itself is already extremely hard. It's even harder if you are drug dependent, if you're a person of colour, if you're black, if you're trans. Being a drug dependent sex worker means you are avoiding the police for two reasons: because you're taking drugs and because you're selling sex. A lot of the time, sex workers who are drug dependent are taking drugs to alleviate trauma they have experienced in their life, whether it's before sex work or during sex work. Because they're committing two crimes and avoiding the police at all costs, drug dependent sex workers are even more susceptible to violence, whether it's accepting shifty clients, whether it's taking abuse from managers because they need the money, whether it's working on a quiet street by themselves. Sex workers are truly some of the most vulnerable people in society. We have seen it time and time again that sex workers seem to be the go-to victims for serial killers and murderers and rapists. Sex workers are often very reluctant to go to the police if they have been victims of violence and if they have been raped. So if a sex worker doesn't want to go to the police if they've been raped, that rapist is now free to roam the streets and rape another sex worker. A sex worker who works with a manager actually isn't criminalised, rather the manager is. But because of brothel keeping laws and sex workers not being able to live together, a lot of the time sex workers will seek out a manager for safety purposes, where the manager can easily exploit them and take a large cut of their earnings. Although the sex worker isn't a criminal and they won't be arrested if they report their manager to the police, it will result in the closure of their workplace and it will push them out onto the street and into unsafe situations if they report their manager to the police. To try and stop power imbalance and exploitative relationships between sex workers and managers, rather than criminalising managers, we need to decriminalise and apply labour laws to sex work so exploitation is far less likely to occur. At the end of the day, a lot of sex workers want to keep their jobs. They need the money. They just want to have workers' rights so they can't be exploited and they don't have to put up with bad working conditions. Mainstream feminism seems to conveniently gloss over police violence towards sex workers and just police violence in general, to be honest. And with criminalisation, more power is being given to police officers, which they can easily abuse. Here's just a few sort of figures that I want to read you guys out. In the 1970s, black women were 7 times more likely to be arrested for prostitution related offences rather than white women. And on top of that, between 2012 and 2015 in New York City, 85% of those charged with loitering for the purpose of prostitution were black or Latinx, despite these groups only making 54% of the NYC population. The fact of the matter is that criminalisation will only lead to more unnecessary arrests of women of colour. And what definitely doesn't help is it seems the increased social media presence of police departments, some of them even tweeting the full names and pictures of women who have been arrested for prostitution related offences, rather than seeing them as victims and women who are just trying to survive. They see them as jesters that we can point and laugh at. And on top of that, to try and stop prostitution, police officers will even confiscate confiscate condoms away from prostitutes, which obviously increases the risk of STIs and unwanted pregnancies. Online advertisements have also started to be targeted and taken down by the police. When sex workers cannot advertise online, they are pushed onto the street, they are more desperate to find clients and find money, therefore they are more likely to take shifty clients who they usually wouldn't accept. The arrests of sex workers are often described as rescues in media, so the police are portrayed as heroes, which just isn't true. You cannot call yourself a hero if you are arresting someone. Are they a victim or are they a criminal? Make your fucking mind up. You cannot claim to be rescuing someone by punishing them. And for the feminists who believe that prostitution should be criminalised because of abusive clients, landlords and managers, these feminists seem to conveniently turn a blind eye when the perpetrators of the violence are police and immigration. I know this sounds very obvious, but the criminalisation of prostitution has made the general public view sex workers as criminals rather than women who are just trying to survive, women who are just trying to get by, women who are victims of a system which has done nothing but let them down their whole life. Criminalisation is not an effective method. It will never be an effective method. The most effective method is asking sex workers what resources they need and supplying them with it. We need to get to the root of why people become sex workers and provide them with the support and resources that they need. When I'm talking about decriminalisation, I'm talking about full decriminalisation, not part decriminalisation. But some countries do follow part decriminalisation, one of those examples being the Nordic model, where the sex worker is not criminalised, but the client is. If you look at this at a very shallow perspective, don't look into it that much, it sort of seems like quite a good idea. Like, power to women, they aren't the criminals, men who are buying sex are. But there's already a lot of flaws if you take just an ever so slightly closer look into it. The Nordic model was created to end demand, so already they are threatening sex workers' livelihoods and how they survive. On top of that, nicer clients are usually men who have wives, they have kids, they have good jobs, so often they have more to lose if they end up being caught with a prostitute and have charges pressed against them. So those nicer clients are driven away. They don't want to risk it. Meanwhile, clients who haven't got that much to lose are usually violent, drunk and volatile clients, and because these sex workers' clients have already been cut in half most likely, they are willing to take a client who seems a little bit more shifty. It further endangers their lives. The Nordic model was intended to give more power to sex workers because they were no longer the criminal. The client is the criminal, but it's actually taken power away because it's taken their clients away. And because of the lack of clients, sex workers are essentially competing with each other, which means that sex workers are more likely to turn to a usually exploitative and abusive manager because half of your earnings is better than nothing. I honestly find it pretty astounding how the Nordic model has been praised as a feminist achievement, yet all it's done is taken power away from sex workers and given it to pimps, managers and the police. Alongside any laws which attempt to abolish sex work, there is usually schemes to go with it, but these schemes are usually not good enough. They are usually very ineffective. There's usually not enough funding put into them. Unfortunately, these schemes do not provide women with the true help and resources that they need, especially the most vulnerable sex workers such as mentally ill sex workers or drug dependent sex workers. And when I talk about decriminalisation being the best way forward, don't get it mixed up with legalisation. Legalisation often goes hand in hand with regulationism. So a lot of laws will be implemented to try and regulate sex work in places where it is legal, therefore it gives more power to the police. When sex work is regulated, more often than not, they are not prioritising the health of the sex worker, they are trying to almost control them as if they're criminals still. Under most regulation laws, the only legal way you can sell sex is in a brothel, which often you'll need very expensive licensing for, and many of these licenses end up being revoked. So a lot of sex workers actually don't have anywhere to work. So again, they'll be pushed to the street, usually pushed to dark and quiet places in an attempt to avoid the police and end up endangering themselves further. Now, don't get me wrong, decriminalisation of course is not going to solve every single problem, but it is a starting point, and it does prioritise the safety of sex workers. Sex workers will be able to live in flats with other sex workers. They'll be able to work for managers without being exploited and have labour law rights. They'll be able to work in well-lit, safe places with other sex workers. They'll be able to report violence against them to the police without fear of arrest. The most important thing is to centre sex workers in this topic of sex work. And I'm talking all sex workers, migrant sex workers, black sex workers, trans sex workers, drug dependent sex workers with families, mentally ill sex workers. We need to be asking them what they think the best solution is and what help they will eventually need to leave sex work altogether. What Revolting Prostitutes mentions is how a lot of feminists need to move past what sex work means, what sex work represents. We need to be focusing on the safety of sex workers. You cannot call yourself a feminist if you do not support the decriminalisation of sex work, as this is the only viable way to keep sex workers safe until the state steps up and starts providing them with the support and resources they need. But yes, that is this video all done, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy this. As you can see, slightly different setup, slightly longer video. This is the type of content that I want to steer more towards. This is only the beginning. I'm not super happy with this, and I doubt I will be when I edit it. This is sort of what I want to do now. Yes, no, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys soon for another one. Goodbye!